Welcome to my YouTube channel Sushant Reddy. Every week I present my life lessons as an entrepreneur in sales, human psychology and wealth creation. In episode 10, I continue with the topic of accountability. In this episode, I look at 4 topics. Why we need to be accountable, why accountability is always a single player game, concept of principal agent, and finally, we look at the 4 ways to practice accountability in our daily lives. In previous episodes, I discussed the first 3 components of wealth creation, i.e. specific knowledge, leverage, and patience. This is the last episode in this lab series of wealth creation. In the last episode, we defined accountability as the ability to take risks and accept failure in public under one's own name. We said that accountability has 3 pillars: risk, public commitment, and ownership. If either of these pillars are missing, there is no real accountability. We talked about Cicero's Sword of Damocles, the painting that demonstrates real accountability, where the sword brings the risk, throne brings the ownership, and well-being of the subjects brings public commitment. We spoke about people who enjoy the upside but don't have much downside, like the minister in the king's court. With that context, let's jump into today's episode. Ray Dalio, the founder of one of the world's largest and most successful hedge funds, crystallized his learnings in life in a book called Principles. In this book, Ray had described that every man's life can be explained by a simple illustration that's called the circle of success. Every person picks a path in which he or she wants to grow. This path leads to setbacks. The roadblocks created in this path compel a person to try out different iterations to sustain or get back the growth. While most iterations might not yield results, a few will lead to improvement, and this improvement drives further growth. So, our entire life on paper is just a series of circles that we have completed. Greater the number of circles, more is the quality and impact we create in our lives. If we look at the stages of this circle of success closely, we'll understand the role of accountability. Let's start with the first step of growth. When we start on anything, we usually expect the path of growth to move something like this. Unfortunately, nothing worthwhile in life follows this path. Mother Nature ensures that the forces of life bend this path and reverse its course. Degree to which the path deviates can vary from situation to situation, but deviation is inevitable. Once we enter stage 2, bad things start to pile up on each other and the deviation starts getting steeper and steeper. Most probable outcome of stage 2 is that it overwhelms us with stress, anxiety, and adversity, and the path ends in a failure. A failure doesn't close the loop of the circle of success and doesn't lead us into the next circle. So failure that way is a permanent end to a world of possibilities created by successive circles of success. A person who takes risks fights failure with iterations. Since he or she feels the pain of loss, the person fights back by looking at the universe of alternatives to change the course of the current path. So accountability bends the curve and prevents our descent into the permanent path of failure. Once iteration kicks in, there is a risk of spending too much time on experimentation. Losing a lot of time on iterations leads to missed opportunities. Here again, accountability helps in bending the curve upwards. Your public commitment compels you to seek out alternatives that lead to a significant improvement and ruthlessly reject alternatives that don't work. Once you start seeing growth, there is a tendency to settle down and be content with that growth. This means that you are not opening the doors to enter the next circle of success that builds on the growth from the existing circle. Missing out on successive circles leads to stagnation and stunted growth. Accountability helps again in pulling back the curve and pushing it into the next circle. Your ownership makes you obligated to complete this loop and enter the next. Notice that apart from the first deviation, that was largely controlled by Mother Nature, at every other deviation, it is the accountability that did the necessary course correction to our circles of success. Accountability is our life's compass and is the only tool available to us for course correction. The biggest takeaway I have is never do things in life where you don't have absolute skin in the game. This takes us to the next topic. Is accountability shared? Whenever you see a person who claims that his or her team is highly accountable, you know that this person hasn't understood the concept of accountability. Accountability of a group is like utopia. It feels great to write down on paper but doesn't exist in the real world. This is one of my biggest learnings as an entrepreneur. Let me explain this with a simple example. All of us have seen a variant of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. A person sits on a hot seat and answers a series of questions. If he gets all of them right, he goes home with a check of $1 million. Let's say our friend Harvey has just won $250,000 and now is facing a question that can win him $500,000. He isn't confident and calls up his closest friend Max. Harvey respects Max because he is responsible, trustworthy, and dependable. Max is very confident he knows the right answer, but Harvey is nervous. Should he trust Max or just take the $50,000 and go back home? After a lot of thinking, he chooses to trust the confidence of Max and go with his answer. Now let's make the game a bit more interesting. Let's say the game producers have created a Russian roulette version of the game. Russian roulette is when you point a gun with a single bullet to your head. You have a 1 in 6 odds of blowing up your head. So if Harvey loses, he can keep the $250,000, but he has to play the Russian roulette. Will Harvey still trust Max? Is the key question to answer. Now, even though Max and Harvey were responsible for winning the game, only Harvey was accountable for winning. When he faced a risk to his life, he chose not to depend on Max's judgment, although nothing in Max had changed. Max had the same conviction and confidence as earlier, just that Harvey didn't want to risk his life on Max's confidence. The key lesson here is, while responsibility can be shared, accountability cannot and should not be shared with others, especially if you're an entrepreneur. To understand why this is so, we need to understand the principal agent problem that is explained in microeconomics. Whenever a group or team comes together with shared objectives, it is inevitable that each person carries a different risk-reward profile. There are people with high incentives and high risks, people with high incentives and low risk, and people with low incentives and low risks. So each person is continuously taking decisions that maximize his or her reward and minimize his or her risk. When accountability is assigned to a group, it simply collapses when tasks move from a person with high risk, high reward to a low risk, low reward. Tasks get clogged, pressure builds up, and finally the whole thing collapses. It's like a pipe burst that happens when water comes in at a high pressure. Let's take the case of a founder. Now let's look at the risk pie. The red circle is your entire universe of risk as a founder. Employees share a lower risk compared to their share of the incentives. Assuming a highly competitive labor market, there will always be an employer who can match the existing pay grade of a skilled employee. This supply creates low risk for employees. Vendors share a higher risk proportionate to their rewards. Vendors not only have a price risk but also run a reputation risk. A failed outcome harms the vendor much more because it can lead to potential loss of business from other similar customers. Advisors and consultants carry a very low downside. They usually work on a fixed retainer basis, and in the worst case scenario, they tend to lose out on the retainer. Investors, on the other hand, have a fairly large risk overlap with the founder, but usually the risk sharing as a percentage of the whole pie is lower than the incentive sharing. The residual risk that a founder carries creates what is called as the agency cost. In this example, founder is the principal and the agent is all other stakeholders such as employees, vendors, contractors, advisors, and investors. If agent's risk and incentives are aligned with that of the founder, there is a maximum overlap on this chart. The residual risk is smaller, creating a low agency environment. If residual risks are high, i.e., there is a minimum overlap on this risk chart, principal's risks are disproportionately higher than agent's risks, creating a high agency cost environment. If you actually plot the risk reward chart, the black line represents a proportionate risk reward. Founders are usually on the top right of this curve. Greater the distance from this black line, higher is the agency cost. Higher the agency cost, lower is the accountability of the founder. So the key takeaway is to understand the concept of agency cost. If you are the guy who is accountable, you need to ensure that you create a low agency cost environment around you. That takes us to the last section on how to practice accountability. Accountability is not a skill that needs to be improved. It's a tool that needs to be used. Each one of us has that tool. We just have to put ourselves in situations where we can use that tool. In my mind, there are 4 ways to practice accountability in real life. The first and an obvious way is to start your own full-time business. The second, if you cannot commit to the first, you can start a side gig with a goal to earn $1 a month for the next 12 months. When someone gives you $1, he or she expects public commitment from you. Try it. It's not as easy as it looks, but I can tell you it forces you to practice accountability. Third, you commit 5 years of your life to something without a plan B. Regardless of what happens, what you earn, how long you earn, your family considerations, etc., you just are sticking to plan A for 5 years, period. Fourth, invest in a project where there is a risk of a full loss of capital. Apart from these 4 ways, I don't know of any other ways to bring accountability in life. If you have any other ideas, please do comment to this video. Finally, to summarize, accountability is our life's compass, a tool for course correction. Without accountability, you miss a feedback loop in life. Accountability, unlike responsibility, cannot be shared. Teams with loose alignment of risk creates high agency costs. Higher the agency cost, lower is the accountability. We discussed the 4 practical ways to be accountable. Pick the one that suits you most and run with it. Thanks for watching. For weekly videos, you can subscribe to my channel or to my newsletter on sushantreddy.com. Until next week, goodbye and stay safe.